Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. In today's edition of Friday Morning Ramblings, I'm going to talk about what I've started, why I started it, when I started it, what I'm doing with it, where it's going now as of February 20th. I'm in Maryland Zone 7, out here in Maryland by Baltimore. We still have freezing nights. It was 19 degrees last night. Let's start with, people have been asking about my overwintering peppers. They're doing pretty well. They're by a southish facing window. They do get some additional light that I have a little light that I put here every once in a while to give them some more light. But the south facing window seems to be working. They're pretty healthy. I had a total of 8 and another 4. What is that? 12. 4 of them died, so I lost about 25%. But the rest are doing pretty well. And some of them are flowering. I've been watching them, and the flowers just don't get that big, so I'm not taking the flowers off. They're getting watered about twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, depending on the heat. I'm going to start fertilizing them in April, get them ready to go. It's actually sheets of ice out there. We're going to go outside too. I'm going to show you where I'm putting my onion starts, how I'm using some of the cold frames and stuff like that, some potting up I'm doing. But the biggest question I get is, when do I start things indoors? And that's a hard question to answer because it varies depending on where you are. Zone 7, and I've done another video where I talked about zones really being irrelevant. Zone 7 stretches all the way across through, like, you know, parts of Tennessee, and it keeps going all the way out to the west coast. The zones vary. Just a quick cut in. I'm also going to show you how I use my cold frames for my onion flats, my kale flats, my lettuce flats. And these are perennial bulbs. These are lilies. $6.98 for 8 bulbs. Just pot them up in the pots. Save yourself a lot of money. Don't mind the snow. It stays warm in here. That's just the way I'm watering it. So that'll melt as I close this, and it will take care of the lily bulbs. By numbers, but the temperatures vary unrelated to the zones, if that makes sense. So just because you're in Zone 7 in Maryland doesn't mean it's the same as Zone 7 in Tennessee, doesn't mean it's the same as Zone 7 in lower part of California or something like that. So don't pay attention to that. So what do you do? Like, when do you start all this stuff indoors? We're going to go over everything I'm doing. I like the Rambling series because I can just talk about stuff. We have perennial flowers up there, peppers, tomatoes, and stuff like that. General rule of thumb, and notice the onion flats are gone because I messed up this part of the video. They'll come back in a second. General rule of thumb is you want your plants, your seed starts, to go into soil that's 50 degrees. And how do you figure that out? You have to look at old weather chart or whatever, look for average temperatures. When your nights are in the upper 40s or 50s for about 2 weeks, your days are getting in the 60s or 70s, you're having warmer rains. Over that 2-week period, your soil's going to warm up to the right temperature. So that's kind of how you're doing your timing for a lot of these. You're really worried about the top 4, 6, 8, 12 inches of soil. Maybe not that deep, but you want the warmth to be in the upper part of your soil so that these root systems can take off, support the green growth. So you have to kind of look at that temperature time. For me, that might be May 1st to May 15th. For other people, maybe in April. Other gardeners, it may not be until June. So you pick that date, 50-degree soil temperature, count backwards by the 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 4 weeks if you're doing annuals, to figure out when you really seed start indoor. Okay, let's get back to where we were. And that tells you when to start plants. For instance, tomatoes, you can start 4, 6, 8 weeks before the soil is 50 degrees. Peppers, you can see some smaller ones over there. A couple in there, you can start them 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks before. I varied the timing on this. So today's February 20th. We'll go over the dates. I've been growing onion seed starts since January. They can stay in these trays for a good 8 to 12 weeks. Onions bulb up not because of the age of the plant, but by the amount of summer sun you have, the number of hours. So if you're in a place that gets like 8 hours or 10 hours of sun, you want short day onions. If you're in a place that gets, I guess, 12 to 14 hours of sun during the summer where you have, you know, the sunlight out, you want mid-season onions, or midday onions, not mid-season, midday onions. And if you have more sun, if you get closer to Alaska where you have sometimes sun 24 hours, you want the long day onions. So onions are really based on the length of day for when they bulb up. So start them in these trays. We're going to move these outside. I'll show you what I'm doing with those too. So let's just start at the top. This is my grow light station for seed starting. This is where I start my seeds. You've seen this a lot. We've talked about the lighting, but I'm basically using two 4-foot lights, 3,000 to 5,000 lumens, a 5100 Kelvin rating or higher. That mimics daylight, just plain old white light. It works. We're going to go around the side. I'm going to show you how I actually put these lights, if you haven't seen the video, on the side for my larger plants. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. As of middle of February, I'm starting to transplant these up into bigger pots. I'm getting them ready to go outside in some cases, but let's just start at the top to try and kind of answer that question. What have I started? Why did I start it? When do you start it? What am I doing with it? So these are all perennial flowers, different varieties of perennial flowers. Perennials will come back year after year in many areas that have frosts and freezing weather. And I like to start these 8 to 12 weeks, in the case of the daisies we'll get to even sooner, before they would go outside. The target range for these is, in my area, is about May 1st. They're frost tolerant in most cases. I'll get frost up until March 15th, but that 50-degree soil temperature starts rolling in later April. We just have frost that may come in, so you have to be cautious. More perennial flowers in here. This is how you can save a fortune. I mean, these are going to be nice and large. The taller plants back there is quinoa, I believe. That should not have been started. I haven't grown it before, and I wanted to see how fast it grows. It grows super fast. Could probably just be direct seeded. But that's coleus right there. More coleus over here. Those are lupines, hollyhocks in the back. Perennials are great to start, like I said, 8, 10, 12 weeks. They grow a little bit more slowly, but they just have really cool root systems that they can be overcrowded in there. You can divide them up pretty easily. They're good to go. And yes, coleus are annuals, but they grow slowly, so I start them indoors. Coming down further, again, the date's February 20th. These are peppers I started on January 9th, targeting about May 1st. So that gives me 4 weeks, about 7 weeks of growth right there, so you can see the difference. And the smaller peppers, that's a ghost pepper. Sometimes the super hots tend to grow much more slowly. Overseeded oregano, that's just going to, in time, that's going to be just torn down the middle, transplanted up. All these onions are going outside. I'll show you that. Some tomatoes I started on about the 26th, 27th of January. They're a good size. That is a little bit shy of 4 weeks of growth, so they grow really fast. So you can get away with just starting your tomatoes 4 weeks, 6 weeks before they would go outside. You don't have to have massive tomato plants. And the reason being is, if I had some larger tomato plants, which I do, and I put them out into cold ground, they're just going to struggle there. They're not going to get really a big jump on the season. So they're struggling. I grew these big plants early, put them out too early, want to get a jump on the season. Well, when I bring these guys out, put them into 50-degree ground, they're going to catch up really quickly to those tomatoes that are bigger and that were put out too early. So again, 50 degrees-ish. Your soil's a good temperature. Count back 6 or 8 weeks. You can even get by with using these as transplants. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a decent size. More onions, sage, oregano, peppers that have been in. Those peppers have been in since January 9th. So they're at 7 weeks too. They're getting ready to be potted up. Here are the daisies. I started these same time, January 9th. And overseeded, great root system. I just kind of fluff it up. I could tear it down the middle if I want, pot them into another pot, but I am just popping them right into these root pouches, these quart root pouches, which I do sell at the seed shop. This is going to be a massive root system by the time I go to put these in the garden in May. These can even go out into my cold frame like this, and I'll just let them grow. Very, very tolerant to the cold temperatures, to the frost and stuff like that. And I don't know if you have a good eye, but you might see some fungus gnats flying around. Just did a video on using beneficial nematodes, and I was going to show you the fungus gnats on one of these yellow sticky traps, which I highly recommend. Those little dots are actually, I get a lot of questions too, those are the seed husks from the onions or the leeks. That's perfectly normal for them to stay on there. The tops of your new growth are usually going to look brown and dead, but over time they're going to take off and they're going to get thick and strong, just like the onions right there. Don't worry about the tops being yellow or anything like that. So as we come up here, you can see how many fungus gnats I've caught in here. These are great to kill the adult, stop the life cycle going. Even with the boiling water trick, somehow I brought fungus gnats in here and it got a little bit out of control. So this is kind of where I'm at. And my whole planning for my plants, for my seed starts, is to have plants to the size I want with a target date of about May 1st, give or take 2 weeks, depending on the variety. When the soil temperatures, let's say, are 50 degrees, definitely for the warm season crops. It can be a little bit cooler for the cold season crops. Cold season crops, cool season crops would be your kales, your lettuces. They can take a frost. And that's basically how I plan everything. Now, these are starting to get bigger. I'm potting up. This is what my space looks like as I pot up. The other thing that I do, all these 6-packs were all in here with different plants in there. So I have tomatoes, lemon balm, those are butterfly bush, purple coneflower, that is lavender. They all didn't germinate, so maybe I had one plant here, one plant there, all this dead space that was turning green. That is algae. When you don't have a plant growing, let's see, in a cell, you get a lot of that green algae. That's not really such a problem for bigger plants like this, but if your soil is too moist right in the beginning, that first week while you're waiting for germination, you can get algae growth on there. You'll especially get it if you put in any nitrogen. That's why I recommend don't put any fertilizer in your seed starting mix till after the plants are growing. But if you start getting the green algae, you can see some right in there, on your soil surface before your seeds germinate, that algae can actually cause a problem with the germination. So you really want to let the tops dry. Don't over soak your seed starting mix at seed start, at the seed starting time before germination. Just make sure it's moist. The seed got some moisture. You're letting the top dry to a light brown. That will keep the algae down. And then once the plants are growing, if you end up with algae, you're fine. I hope that makes sense. So what I do is after a period of growth, I just pop out all the healthy plants, pop out the soil where nothing grew, and I make new 6-packs. Saves you a lot of room. You're not holding space for plants that aren't growing. Dumped all the unused soil. Yeah, I mean, it looked like this. I mean, nothing grew. All the soil that didn't sprout anything goes right in there. I'll let it dry out. I'll reuse it or something like that. So this is kind of, you know, behind the curtain at the Rusted Garden. This is how I kind of plan everything and just move stuff along. I guess the final note for this side is my plant lights stay about 2 to 4 inches above the plants, and as you work your way down, I raise the lights. There's bigger space, and the bigger plants can be inserted onto the different shelves. Now, let's walk over here. What do you do when the plants are really big? So I can't get these all outside now because right now it's 27 degrees. My cold frames are staying, even on really cold nights when it gets into the teens, are staying in the upper 20s. So my onions can go out. They can take a freeze. We'll go out there in a second, like I've been saying. But the rest of these plants can't. So I have potted up some tomato plants. What I'm doing with these is an experiment. So what I'm trying to do is grow a really massive root system in here. I'll be pruning these back, keeping them alive. But I'm not worried about the upper growth. I want great root systems so that when the right temperatures come, I'm putting in, again, a massive root system, which is going to really support rapid growth of the greenery. And I'm hoping to get tomatoes more early this year by trying this out. Also growing the Tiny Tims. I'm going to try and do a video on it indoors. You can see a little one starting now. If you didn't know, tomatoes are self-pollinating, so you can just give them a little shake, and if the pollen is ready, they're going to pollinate themselves. You don't need insects for tomatoes. More of the daisies that are ready to be potted up. Now coming down here, I have peppers. I started back in November 29th. They're not huge because they don't have a lot of soil. So keep in mind that if you want to grow large peppers or larger tomatoes, you really want to maximize the size of the cell. Now, these are a little bit bigger and stronger. Let's just check. These were started on 11/24 too. So I sell these different cells at my seed shop. But you can see the standard 6-pack, smaller. The 4-pack with more soil, bigger. The bigger 6-pack, not necessarily much larger than this, but very healthy, nice and thick stems, nice green leaves. They're looking pretty good. What am I doing with these? Well, these are prop plants. But I'm also going to be pruning these back heavily. Like I'll be taking off the flowers. I may prune the tops of these, and some of them I already did. When you prune the top of a pepper, it sends out more side shoots right here. So like the tomatoes, I'm going to try and get a nice bushy, stocky pepper plant with a great root system. Get peppers more quickly. That's, you know, an ongoing experiment. It does work, but you don't need to do all this. So where my plants are being held when they get to the bigger pots, right here. That's a 5,000 lumen, just like the video I just did, LED light from Walmart. It was only $17, 5100 Kelvin. I'm just putting one on the side there, one on the side over there. This is a nice holding place. This is a southish facing window. I can hold my mature plants here until they're ready to go outside. Flats down there are turmeric, ginger, sweet potato. I'm going to have tons of that this year out in my garden. But I just wanted to give you an alternative to putting grow lights under here for the bigger plants. You just don't need that. Up top there is my sweet potato plant, which I don't know if you'll be able to see it because of the light change, but it is starting to sprout up, so that'll be nice. I think that was too dark, sorry. But the whole seed starting indoors plan, and I'm going to keep reiterating this now going on, is you're targeting 50-degree soil for your warm plants, a little bit less for your cool weather plants. And that's the plan. If you just go by zone, it's going to be really it's going to mislead you, because what I'm doing here in Maryland is very different than Tennessee and other zones that are zone 7s. If you haven't already seen it or heard me talk about it, that is a green stalk tower in a rusted garden red. Only 500 of them were made, unique for the rusted garden. I'm going to be doing a complete series on vertical gardening, trying to get a whole garden in these vertical towers on container gardening. If you want to subscribe, ring the bell. I do real-time series. This way you'll get notification when they come up. So this is sort of the method to my madness. Hope it gives you some idea in building the principles to how you might rotate and start different flowers, herbs, warm crops, cool crops. Now what's not in here yet are my annuals, like marigolds and annual flowers, also basil. They're going to be started 4 weeks before that 50-degree temperature, so I will start them probably about April 1st, 4 or 5 weeks. Cucumber, zucchini, squash, your big fast-growing plants, you really want to start them in larger containers, larger cells. I mean, those 6-packs are okay, but I really recommend something like by the blue watering container there, about that size, or even in the brown container like that. You use yogurt cups. Start them indoors. In about 4 weeks, you want to get them outside. You don't want them overgrowing indoors. And that pretty much covers everything that I grow or seed start. Let's go outside, show you what I'm doing with some of these onion starts and some other things. Here's a good example of the cool weather crops. So in these 2 flats, I have kale and lettuces mostly. They're maybe a week old. They'll germinate really quickly. If you start these under your grow lights, as soon as you see a couple break the surface, get them outside as long as it's above 32 degrees, because the warmth of the lights, your house, will make these really get leggy and just grow too fast. So once they break the surface, if you put them outside for 2 days or so, bring them in at night, don't let them freeze. As long as it's 32 plus during the day, it will slow them down. They're going to be nice and stocky, and you can see how healthy they are. Now, I'm not going to take these back upstairs. These are going to go into my cold frame too, because that cold frame is staying warm enough to support kale and lettuce, which can actually take a freeze. These are going to do much better out there because they're going to grow more slowly. They're going to be stocky versus staying inside for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, where they can get tall and lanky. And that's not because of lack of light, it's because it's too warm in the house. And these are the tomatoes that have just been put outside. So these are being grown without grow lights. These all be put outside now. It just got to 30 degrees with the sun, that they'll be perfectly fine. Just a couple of tricks for your cool weather crops. So it's windy and cold outside, frozen, that's sheets of ice. But the cold frame at night is staying 28, 29, 30 degrees. And during the day, let's see if I can get this in there, 64 degrees. So that's plenty warm. And you can see the number under the 6 is 31, and the right side is 65. That's the high and low over the last 24 hours. So I put in the onions, the lettuces, the kale, and really important, because it's warm in here, you can see those little specks on the ground. That, well, those are iron phosphate pellets, or you can use sulfur pellets. They're baited pellets to really deal with snails and slugs. Because it's warm in here, some of them I'm sure are on here and will come and love to eat on your kale. So put out those pellets. You can tell, through January, February, everything has been warm enough in here because I've pulled out all those weeds. And if you got weeds growing in there, your cold frame is more than ready to take your onions, your leeks, your lettuces, your kales, and I'll just keep this closed. This is a jewel cold frame. I don't particularly recommend them. Maybe I will after using this for a year or two. When it heats up to the right temperature, this will automatically open. So it's pretty cool. I will put a link to my Amazon shop if you want to check it out. But I just looked. The jewels aren't there. But again, if you're looking for one, it's J-U-W-E-L. And I think it's the BioStar 1500. All right, let's go over to the truck, show you what I'm doing there. It's pretty straightforward. These are lily bulbs, 8 of them for $6.98. These pots were 50 cents on sale at Home Depot. I don't know what size they are, maybe a gallon. You can get the basic idea. Fill them up halfway, 3 or 4 inches of soil on top. These are good to go into the cold frame, water them in. All 8 of these will do perfectly well. You'll get your perennial bulbs established. They'll be ready to go into the ground where you want. When you put them into the ground, you can worry about the appropriate depth, but 3 or 4 inches of soil on top. This I got today at Costco. It was indoors, so it's warm. I didn't want to do this inside because of the fungus gnat issue. Just pot them outside. It's 29 degrees actually, I just checked. They'll be perfectly fine like this. Get them into the cold frame. You could keep them in your house if you want. So let's go back upstairs. Everything is just sheets of ice around here. Okay, back inside, you can see all the space I have. I'll be starting a lot of tomatoes first week of March. Get that 8 weeks of growing time. Plenty of space for more tomatoes, more peppers, my annuals, my cucumbers, my zucchini, all that kind of stuff. So this is how I'm transitioning stuff out. So the whole key, 50-degree soil for your warmer crops, a little bit less for your cooler crops. And as I pot up the ginger down there, because they kind of like the shade, they're all going to be dropped right in here. So I'll have all these great ginger plants. That will give me 10 months of growing time, because they're going to get 3 months of growing in here, 6 or 7 more months outside in the garden. I should have really nice ginger rhizomes. If you're interested in these vertical towers, I'll put a link in the video description. Thanks so much for watching, letting me ramble. I think this is one of the most fun things to do with respect to gardening, is really growing stuff indoors, because you can start so many different varieties you can't find at the big box stores, but you can save yourself so much money. So when you're thinking about buying something like this green stalk tower, setting up a grow light station, buying your lights, maybe getting a cold frame, save yourself a lot of money, start your seeds, frees up your budget, you can buy things for your garden. Thanks for watching, and please stick out. Oh, one more thing. These are some of the bulbs that I'm going to be putting into those pots. So the Blazing Star are great, the Liatris, I believe. More lilies. If you see Dutch irises, they're best planted right into the soil. You don't need to pot those up. But I'll also be putting in some garlic and stuff like that into pots and growing stuff that way. Again, thanks for watching, and please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com.